We'll look at workflow in color. We've done a separate look at black and white workflow. And this is a shot, again, one that I took in San Miguel. I shot this with the Panasonic GH2.
February 17th at 11:41 a.m.
Would you like to know what I had for lunch afterwards?
Yeah.
This is in a part of San Miguel, way up a hill, called Balcones. It's like the balconies, you know, the area, because the town is built in a U-shaped bowl. Anyhow, very, very steep streets and beautiful painted walls and just kind of fun. And I was struck by the graphic quality of this little corner. And again, it was a busy corner with lots of cars zooming by, so this was pretty much a grab shot. Now let me show you what I ended up with. So there's the final result. Not a huge difference. And let's look at the two of them side by side. And I think this is worth doing because it's not taking something from, oh gee, you took something mundane and made it exciting. I think I started off with something potentially exciting and just enhanced it. Finessed it, yeah. Turned it into something that was just a little punchier, stronger, and more interesting.
And I'm sure when you were looking, and you know, we don't have the advantage of sitting over your shoulder while you were doing the selection editing, but I assume that wasn't the only frame.
No, I don't have the others here, but they were small variations on the theme. So let's now go to this original, and I'll go D for develop, and let's go to the history palette, and here we are at the import. And again, working through the process. Rather than actually doing it, I think it's better to show what I did at the time. Moving the sliders is pretty straightforward.
As is your nature, the first thing you did was start to crop.
Crop. And again, it was that little bit there that just pulls your eye away from what it's about. Remember my whole talk about what is the shot about? Well, it's about this stuff, and that is a distraction. So first thing I did was crop there. Next crop was a little more dramatic. Now again, it's almost all down here because there's just more here than I need.
Makes it heavy bottom.
It still tells the story, but there's now a more appropriate distribution of the big blocks of color.
It really is a matter of distillation, distilling the outer frame of the image that you want to see. And I think it's also useful to point out, as you said before, you're not in the least bit constrained by the format of the sensor that you happen to be using or the paper that you happen to be printing on. You know, whatever crop is best for the image, that's what you're looking for.
35mm cameras are a 3:2 aspect ratio. The 4/3 cameras and medium format cameras can be square, they can be 4:3. There are all these different aspect ratios. I think the image should tell you what it wants to be.
I agree.
Not some manufacturer that says, no, here it is. And I find, and again, just a personal thing, how back in the film days, photographers used to print, including the sprocket holes.
Oh, I used to do that
or
all
the rebate.
time. A cutout negative carrier.
Yeah.
Now I do it all the time, and I just run a plug-in.
Okay.
And whatever the final crop happens to be.
Oh, you just want to add sprocket holes.
Well, not sprocket holes, rough edge.
Rough edge, all right. Well, that's fine. That's slightly different. No, but for some, it's a religion. I'm showing you that this is exactly what the camera recorded.
And I would argue that to a certain extent that's a conceit that is self-limiting. I think it limits your ability when you do that to really finesse and fine-tune the image for the final view.
It's a little cliched to say it, but I'll say it anyhow. The image will speak to you. It will tell you what it wants to be. You just have to listen. Mixing metaphors of sight and sound, but anyhow.
Yeah, and you kind of stole that from me, but that's all right.
Did I? No. I only steal from the best.
Yeah, okay. All right, so
next is white balance.
And I suppose you actually went in there and just clicked with the white balance tool.
Well, it's interesting because I probably clicked on that gray stone because there really isn't anything white here. But in fact, the camera's original white balance was pretty close. If you look up here at the histogram, there's hardly any change. I just did it as part of my religion. Okay. Next is I adjusted the exposure, setting the white point. Then I set the black point, and then I adjusted the brightness. Okay.
So again, remember the brightness is the midpoint slider after you set the black and the white point. So you actually did it in the right order. No, I'm just saying.
Okay. You sounded surprised.
No. In terms of the processing steps, now understand this is a parametric edit. So you can always go back and you've never committed until you've actually, like made a print.
Right.
But it's natural to make adjustments, but there is a more efficient way of doing it. If you did the brightness and then the black and then the white point clipping, then the odds are you'll have to go back and readjust the brightness.
Yeah.
So start with the black, adjust the white.
No, I do the white, then the black,
That's
then
fine.
the midpoint. Okay. Then I added a little clarity, and then some vibrance. Now again, not much, plus 13 on the vibrance.
Yes, Seth always does plus 17 on vibrance.
Okay. And if I go back and forth, it's hardly even noticeable, just a little bit punchier. Then I did my sharpening. So put on a mask, did the sharpening, and then I guess for some reason I cropped again. And then I cropped again.
Well, this is all kind of finesse polishing. I mean, you're literally polishing the image that is in the final frame. And that's what you do,
Yep. And then for some reason, which I don't recall now, I went back to the clarity slider, and I went back to vibrance and kicked it up a little bit. I went to 18, so I guess I was channeling Seth.
Well, it's a little bit like South Beach.
I guess, yeah. And then I punched the contrast a bit. Again, these are subtle, and I'll
Now,
just go back and forth here so we can
It should
see
also be pointed out that contrast, when you adjust the contrast curve, that's a complex move so that you brighten the bright and darken the dark. It also has an impact on the saturation of the color. So if you increase the contrast, you increase the saturation a bit. And there's some debate whether or not contrast should be a luminance-based tone adjustment only and not impact the saturation. Unlike Photoshop's contrast, which also does a hue torque, which can actually change the color, Camera Raw and Lightroom, it only really changes the saturation. And basically, this was Thomas's decision because it was more work than doing just a luminance-based contrast. So it was his decision in his testing that was more film-like, and so that's what he did.
Thanks, Thomas. So I guess I looked at this then and went, whoa, that's a bit hot up there. So I added a grad filter. No,
Yeah, I
but
know.
my grad filter had previously been a lightning filter.
Yes.
And then I adjusted it.
Yeah, and in practice, that's one of the problems that you often have in that you know what tool you want to use, but you may not adjust the setting before you create the gradation.
Exactly. So let's just go here. So I added the grad filter. It was the wrong way. I then went the right way. I then darkened it a little bit more, and then I did some tiny tweak. And that was basically it. And then I printed. I printed it several times. So let's print it again.
Okay.
We will go to the print module. I will make sure that my resolution, let's say I started off at 304, we'll bump it to 360, my sharpening is all
Why don't you
good.
show them, because when you created your template, you had it with the print sharpening off. One of the things when you create templates, you can always rest assured that when you click on the template and it's white, then you know for a fact that all the other parameters on the right side are in play.
So in other words, now print resolution is turned off.
Yes.
And I like it this way because it allows me to see here what the actual resolution is.
Now the key to that though is if you scroll up in the show guide, you've got the dimensions.
Right. It's this guy here.
Yes. By
Turn it
default,
on.
it's off.
It's off,
Yes.
I know. So I find that really invaluable. So at roughly 11 by 13, this is going to print at 304 ppi, and we're going to have a separate discussion about appropriate and proper print resolutions for different kinds of printers. Now this printer...
But you're finding this printer is pretty darn sharp.
Well, it's fascinating because if we go into the print settings, I've got this set to Super Photo 5760, which I thought was kind of like, what is this? A little marketing gimmick. But these are the new heads.
Yes.
And wow, it slows down the printing, but you can see it. This may be the sharpest printer I have ever used.
Which, ironically, is handy because it's a smaller printer, and as it will come out when we're talking about resolution, the smaller the print, the more pixels per inch you actually need. So making small prints that are incredibly detailed is important.
Okay, so I'm going to hit print. Let's see what we get.
Okay.
Okay. And so here's the print.
Very nice.
Yeah. And
I
again,
love that color. And look at the texture of that.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah. But again, it was important to tone this down. It was too bright, and so adding that grad filter up here was really important. Yeah, let's hold it up for the camera. So again, I've become very enamored of small cameras like the Micro Four Thirds cameras, like the little Panasonic GH2, like the Fuji, which is an APS size sensor, but it's only 12 megapixels. And I'm increasingly finding that for prints of this size, and frankly, even though I have large printer, I don't print that often. It's only for exhibition. But in the range of 12 to 16 megapixels, as long as you've got a good lens, that's fine.
And you've got good technique.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, image quality. If you had not had a substantial enough shutter speed, a little bit of motion blur in a capture, even
it would have killed
capture, it would have killed it.
Well, while we're here, let's just answer the question. It was a 400th of a second at f8.
And
ISO
with
160.
a 48 millimeter lens, so it was not a really long focal length. It
No,
was in the middle of the range.
Yeah. So, in other words, handheld, sunny day, but 400th of a second.
F8, which is down a couple stops from wide open.
Yeah.
So everything about that was optimal.
Yeah. Okay. That's the workflow for working in color.
Your time in Mexico has been very colorful.
Yeah. I love the light there.
Yeah.